The rain battered my windshield like it had a personal grudge, each drop a tiny fist pounding the glass. I was parked at the edge of Willow Creek's only gas station, the neon sign buzzing like a dying insect, when Ethan climbed into my passenger seat. His damp hoodie clung to his frame, and his eyes, those sharp, hazel eyes I'd known since we were kids, held a storm darker than the one outside. "Thanks for this, Caleb," he said, voice low, almost lost in the rain's rhythm. He didn't look at me, just stared out at the blurry world beyond the glass. Ethan, my brother Jake's best friend since middle school, was no stranger to me. But tonight felt different. He was different. The boy who'd once stolen my skateboard and laughed until he cried was gone, replaced by someone carrying a weight I couldn't yet name. We'd grown up in this nowhere town in upstate New York, where the biggest excitement was the annual fair or a Friday night football game. Jake and Ethan were inseparable, the kind of duo that made you jealous of their effortless bond. I was the tag-along little brother, always on the fringes, watching Ethan's crooked smile light up our backyard barbecues. But I was 19 now, home from my first year at college, and Ethan was 21, still stuck here, working at his dad's auto shop. Tonight, Jake was out of town, and Ethan had called me for a ride after his shift. Simple enough. Except nothing about this felt simple. The car smelled of wet denim and the faint pine of my air freshener. Ethan shifted, his knee brushing mine in the cramped front seat of my old Civic. "You didn't have to come," he said, finally glancing my way. His jaw was tight, like he was chewing on words he couldn't spit out. "Didn't have anything better to do." I lied. Truth was, I dropped everything when he texted. Something about Ethan always pulled me in. Like gravity, I couldn't fight. Maybe it was the way he'd always seen me. Really seen me. Even when Jake was too busy being the golden boy. The rain eased as I pulled onto the road, headlights cutting through the dark. Ethan's silence was loud, filling the car with questions I didn't know how to ask. "Rough day at the shop?" I tried, keeping my voice light. He snorted, a bitter sound. "Rough life, man." His fingers drummed on his thigh, a nervous tick I hadn't seen before. "You ever feel like you're stuck in someone else's story?" I glanced at him, surprised. Ethan wasn't the philosophical type. He was action grease-stained hands, quick laughs, and dumb bets with Jake over who could jump the creek. "What's going on, Ethan?" I asked, slowing at a stop sign. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for the radio, flipping through static until he landed on some old rock song, the kind our parents loved. "Nothing," he muttered. "Just tired." But I knew better. Ethan wasn't just tired. Something was eating him alive, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what he'd say if I pushed. So I didn't. I drove, the hum of the engine and the patter of rain filling the space between us. The road stretched toward his house, a small ranch-style place on the edge of town. But I took the long way, winding through back roads lined with pines. Neither of us mentioned it. "Remember that summer we built that treehouse?" Ethan said suddenly, his voice softer now, like he was pulling the memory from deep underwater. "You were, what, 10? Kept dropping nails and crying about it." I laughed, the sound easing the tension in my chest. "You and Jake wouldn't let me quit. Kept saying I'd thank you later." "You did." He smirked, but it faded fast. "Feels like a lifetime ago." "It was," I said, though it stung to admit. Those days when Ethan's laughter was easy and I was just the kid brother were gone. College had changed me, opened my eyes to who I was, who I wanted. I come out to Jake last year, and he'd been cool about it. But I hadn't told Ethan. Not yet. Not when every look he gave me made my heart do stupid things. The road curved, and I stole a glance at him. His profile was sharp against the window, raindrops casting shadows across his face. He looked like he was carrying a secret too heavy for one person. "You can talk to me. You know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned, and for a moment, I thought he'd spill it all. But then his phone buzzed, and he cursed under his breath, fishing it out of his pocket. The screen lit up his face, and I saw the name, Dad. Ethan's expression hardened, and he silenced the call, shoving the phone back in his pocket. "Everything okay?" I asked, my gut twisting. He didn't answer, just leaned his head back against the seat, eyes closed. "Keep driving, Caleb," he said. "Just keep driving." So I did. The night stretched on, the rain a constant companion, and I wondered what I'd gotten myself into. Ethan needed a ride home, but it was clear he wasn't going anywhere not yet. And as the miles piled up, I realized I didn't want him to. Not when he was looking at me like I was the only thing keeping him grounded. The road ahead was dark, but the space between us was alive, electric with unspoken truths. I didn't know where this night would take us, but I knew one thing. Ethan wasn't just Jake's best friend anymore. Not to me. The dashboard clock glowed 10:47 p.m., and we were still driving, looping through the quiet backroads of Willow Creek. Ethan hadn't said a word in 10 minutes, his silence heavier than the rain, now trickling to a drizzle. I wanted to ask about the call from his dad, about the shadows in his eyes. But every time I opened my mouth, the words felt wrong, like they'd shatter whatever fragile thing was holding us together. "Turn left up here," Ethan said suddenly, pointing to a dirt road barely visible in the dark. It led to Miller's Pond, a place we used to sneak to as kids, throwing rocks and dreaming of bigger lives. I didn't question him, just turned the wheel, the tires crunching over gravel. The pond came into view, its surface a mirror for the stars breaking through the clouds. I parked near the water's edge, cutting the engine. The silence was deafening now, broken only by the soft lapping of the pond and Ethan's uneven breathing. He unbuckled his seatbelt but didn't move to get out. Neither did I. "Why here?" I asked, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet. He shrugged, staring at the water. "Needed somewhere that wasn't home." That word home hung between us, loaded with meaning I couldn't unpack. Ethan's dad was a hard man, the kind who thought emotions were a weakness and a wrench could fix anything. I'd seen the way he talked to Ethan, all sharp edges and expectations. But I'd never seen Ethan flinch like he had at that phone call. "You want to tell me what's going on?" I tried again, softer this time. He laughed, a hollow sound. "You wouldn't get it, Caleb. Try me." He turned to me, and for the first time all night, he really looked at me. Not a glance, not a passing flicker, but a look that pinned me in place. His eyes were raw, unguarded, and I felt my pulse kick up. "You ever feel like you're lying to everyone?" he asked. "Like you're wearing a mask, and if it slips, everything falls apart." My throat tightened. I knew that feeling better than he could have guessed. Coming out to Jake had been like jumping off a cliff, not knowing if I'd land or crash. But I hadn't told Ethan, hadn't found the courage to say the words to the one person whose opinion mattered more than it should. "Yeah," I said. "I know what that's like." He nodded, like he'd expected that answer. "I'm tired of it," he whispered. "Tired of pretending." Pretending what? My heart was pounding now, loud enough I was sure he could hear it. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened the car door and stepped out, his boots sinking into the muddy bank. I followed, the cool night air hitting my skin like a wake-up call. Ethan stood by the pond, hands in his pockets, his silhouette sharp against the water's reflection. I stopped a few feet away, giving him space, but not too much. My dad found something, he said finally, his voice barely carrying. A letter. Wasn't meant for him. I waited, sensing the weight of what was coming. Ethan turned, his face half lit by the moon. It was from me. To someone. A guy. The world tilted. I stood frozen, processing his words. Ethan, the guy who dated half the cheerleading squad in high school, who'd always been Jake's wingman at parties, was telling me this. My mind raced, piecing together every glance, every moment I'd chalked up to wishful thinking. He freaked out. Ethan continued, his voice cracking. Called me things I can't repeat. Said I'm not his son if I'm like that. He kicked a rock into the pond, the splash echoing in the quiet. I can't go back there. Caleb. Not tonight. I stepped closer, close enough to see the tremor in his hands. You don't have to, I said. You can stay with me. Jake's gone, and my parents won't care. He looked at me, searching my face like he was looking for a lie. Why are you doing this? You don't owe me anything. Because I've been in love with you since I was 15. I wanted to say. Because you're the reason I figured out who I am. But the word stuck. So I settled for. You're my friend. Ethan. That's enough. He laughed. Softer this time. But it was laced with pain. You're too good. You know that. Not really, I said, managing a smile. Just don't want you out here alone. We stood there, the pond stretching out before us, the night wrapping us in its quiet. I wanted to reach for him, to bridge the gap between us. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I said, come on. Let's get back in the car. It's freezing. He nodded, and we climbed back into the Civic, the warmth of the heater a small comfort. Ethan leaned his head against the window, his breath fogging the glass. I don't know what to do, he admitted. I've been hiding this for so long, and now it's out, and I feel lost. You're not lost, I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. You're right here, and I'm not going anywhere. He turned to me, and for a moment, I thought he might say something that would change everything. But he just nodded, a small, grateful gesture, and closed his eyes. I started the car, pulling back onto the road, not toward his house or mine, but somewhere else, somewhere we could both breathe. The night was far from over, and I had a feeling this ride was just the beginning. The clock ticked past midnight, and we were still driving, the road a ribbon of black under the stars. Ethan's confession hung in the air, heavy but fragile, like a glass ornament waiting to shatter. I gripped the wheel, my mind spinning with questions I wasn't sure I could ask, not without pushing him too far. Where are we going? Ethan asked, his voice rough, like he'd just woken from a dream. I didn't have an answer. I'd been driving aimlessly, letting the road decide our path. Somewhere safe, I said finally. You hungry? He gave a half smile, the first real one I'd seen all night. Starving. We ended up at Rosie's Diner, a 24-hour spot on the edge of town where truckers and insomniacs gathered over greasy burgers and weak coffee. The neon sign buzzed as we pulled into the lot, and Ethan hesitated before getting out, like he wasn't sure he could face the world yet. I didn't push, just waited until he nodded and followed me inside. The diner was quiet, just a few late-night stragglers nursing coffee at the counter. We slid into a booth by the window, the vinyl seats creaking under us. Ethan's hoodie was still damp, his hair a mess of dark curls. But he looked more like himself here, under the fluorescent lights. The waitress, an older woman with a kind smile, took our order: 2 burgers, fries, and Coke, and left us to the silence. "You didn't have to do this," Ethan said, picking at a napkin. "I'm a mess right now." "You're not a mess," I said, leaning forward. "You're just dealing with something heavy. You don't have to go through it alone." He looked at me, his eyes searching again, like he was trying to figure out if I meant it. "You're different. You know," he said, "from how I remember you. Braver." I laughed, caught off guard. "Braver? I'm just the kid who cried over dropped nails." "Nah," he said, shaking his head. "You're more than that. Always were." My heart did that stupid thing again, racing like it was trying to outrun my common sense. I wanted to tell him everything: how I'd spent years watching him, how his laugh had been my compass through high school, how I'd come out to Jake but not to him because I was terrified of what he'd think. But the words stayed locked away, too big for this diner booth. Our food arrived, and Ethan dug in, eating like he hadn't in days. Between bites, he started talking not about his dad or the letter, but about small things. The shop, a customer who'd brought in a wrecked Mustang, the time he and Jake got stuck in a tree trying to rescue a kite. It was like he was rebuilding himself, piece by piece. And I listened, letting him find his way back. But then he stopped, mid-sentence, his eyes fixed on something outside. I followed his gaze and saw a pickup truck pulling into the lot, his dad's truck, unmistakable with its rusted bumper and faded blue paint. Ethan tensed, his fork clattering against the plate. "He doesn't know you're here," I said quickly, though I wasn't sure that was true. "Just breathe. Okay." Ethan's jaw clenched, his hands balling into fists. He's been calling nonstop. Probably tracked my phone or something. The truck parked, and his dad stepped out, a tall figure in a flannel jacket, his face shadowed under a baseball cap. He didn't come inside, just stood by the truck, scanning the diner through the window. Ethan sank lower in the booth, like he could disappear into the vinyl. "He can't make you go with him," I said, my voice firm. "You're 21. Ethan. You get to choose." He looked at me, fear and defiance warring in his eyes. "You don't know him, Caleb. He doesn't let go." "Then we leave," I said, already reaching for my wallet. "Right now?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. We slid out of the booth, leaving cash on the table, and slipped out the side door, avoiding the front where his dad stood. My car was parked just out of sight, and we moved fast, the cool night air sharp against my skin. I started the engine, pulling out of the lot before his dad could spot us. "Where to now?" Ethan asked, his voice shaky but steadier than before. "My place," I said. "You can crash there. No one's gonna bother you." He didn't argue, just leaned back, his eyes on the road. As we drove, the tension eased, replaced by something softer, something unspoken. I glanced at him, his profile soft in the dashboard's glow, and felt a pull I couldn't ignore. Ethan wasn't just running from his dad tonight, was running towards something, and I was starting to think I was part of it. The drive to my house was quiet, but it wasn't the heavy silence from before. It was the kind of quiet that felt like a promise. Like the moment before a storm breaks and everything changes. My house was dark when we pulled into the driveway. The only light coming from the porch lamp my mom always left on. Ethan followed me inside, his steps hesitant, like he was trespassing. The living room smelled of lavender from my mom's candles, a stark contrast to the chaos we'd left behind at the diner. I locked the door behind us, the click loud in the quiet. "You can take my room," I said, flipping on a light. "I'll crash on the couch." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not kicking you out of your bed, Caleb. I'll take the couch." "Argue with me later," I said, managing a smile. "You need a real bed tonight." He didn't fight me, just nodded and followed me upstairs. My room was a mess, books scattered from my college semester. Posters of bands I barely listened to anymore, but Ethan didn't seem to notice. He dropped his bag by the door and sat on the edge of the bed, looking lost. "You okay?" I asked, leaning against the doorway. He rubbed his hands over his face, exhaling sharply. "I don't know what I am. It's all happening too fast." I sat beside him, keeping a careful distance. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight. Just get some sleep." He looked at me, his eyes softer now, less guarded. "Why are you so good to me?" The question caught me off guard, and for a moment, I couldn't find words. "Because I see you," I wanted to say. "Because you're more than Jake's best friend to me." Instead, I said, "Because you do the same for me." He held my gaze, and the air between us shifted, charged with something I couldn't name. "I don't know if I would," he said quietly. "I'm not as strong as you." "You're stronger than you think," I said, my voice steady despite the way my heart was hammering. "You're here, aren't you?" He smiled. A small, broken thing, but it was enough. I stood, heading for the door. "Get some rest. We'll figure this out tomorrow." "Caleb," he called, stopping me. I turned, and he was standing now, closer than I expected. "Thanks. For everything." I nodded, my throat tight, and left him there, closing the door behind me. Downstairs, I sank onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. My mind was a mess of questions and hope, tangled together like wires. Ethan was upstairs, in my bed, carrying a secret that mirrored my own. I didn't know what it meant for us, but I knew I wasn't letting him face this alone. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the living room windows, pulling me from a restless sleep. I heard movement upstairs, then footsteps. Ethan appeared, his hair tousled, wearing one of my old t-shirts he must have found in my dresser. It was too big on him, and the sight made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "You got coffee?" "Yeah. Come on." I led him to the kitchen, where I started the coffee maker, the familiar routine grounding me. We sat at the table, mugs in hand, the silence comfortable for the first time all night. "I need to go back," Ethan said after a while, staring into his coffee. "To get my stuff. I can't stay there, but I need my things." "I'll go with you," I said without hesitation. "We'll do it together." He looked at me, gratitude and something else, something deeper in his eyes. "You don't have to." "I know," I said, "but I want to." The drive to Ethan's house was tense, the morning light doing little to ease the weight of what we were about to do. His dad's truck was in the driveway, and Ethan's hands tightened on his knees as we parked. "Stay here," he said. "This is my fight." "Not a chance," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. "We're in this together." He didn't argue, just gave me a look that said more than words could. We walked up to the house, the air thick with the threat of confrontation. Ethan knocked, then pushed the door open when no one answered. The house was quiet, too quiet, and I felt my pulse spike as we stepped inside. His dad was in the living room, sitting in an armchair with a beer in hand, even though it was barely noon. His eyes narrowed when he saw me. "What's he doing here?" he growled. "Standing." "He's with me," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. "I'm just grabbing my stuff." "You think you can just walk out?" his dad snapped, stepping closer. "After what I found, you're a disgrace." I felt my fists clench, but Ethan held up a hand, stopping me. "I'm not doing this," he said to his dad. "I'm leaving. You don't get to decide who I am." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I thought his dad might hit him. But Ethan stood his ground, and something in his stance, something fierce and unbroken, made his dad back off. Just a step. We moved fast, grabbing Ethan's clothes and a few belongings from his room, shoving them into a duffel bag. His dad watched, silent now, his anger a dark cloud over the room. We were out in 10 minutes, the door slamming behind us. Ethan didn't look back as we climbed into my car, and I didn't ask him to. As I pulled away, he let out a shaky breath, his hands trembling in his lap. "You did it," I said, glancing at him. "You're free." He laughed, a raw, relieved sound. "Yeah, thanks to you." The road stretched ahead, and for the first time, it felt like we were driving towards something, not just away. The next few days were a blur of quiet moments and unspoken questions. Ethan crashed at my place, taking my bed while I stuck to the couch, ignoring my parents' raised eyebrows when they got home from their trip. They didn't ask too much, just accepted Ethan's presence with the same warmth they'd always shown him. But I could feel the shift between us, a current running under every glance, every accidental brush of hands. We spent our days avoiding the world, holed up in my room watching old movies or playing video games like we were kids again. But it wasn't the same. Every laugh, every quiet moment, felt charged, like we were teetering on the edge of something neither of us was ready to name. One night, after my parents had gone to bed, Ethan found me in the kitchen, rummaging for a late-night snack. He leaned against the counter, watching me with that look that made my stomach flip. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked. "For good?" "All the time," I admitted, pulling a bag of chips from the pantry. "College is great, but it's not far enough. I want more. Somewhere I can be me. No hiding." He nodded, like he understood more than I'd said. "I've been thinking about it too. After all this, I can't stay here." "Where would you go?" I asked, my heart picking up speed. He shrugged, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "Somewhere new. Somewhere I don't have to pretend." The air between us thickened, and I set the chips down, suddenly not hungry. "You don't have to pretend with me," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He froze, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, smell the faint scent of his shampoo. "Caleb," he said, his voice low, "there's something I need to tell you." My breath caught, but before he could say more, His phone buzzed on the counter. It was Jake, his name lighting up the screen. Ethan hesitated, then answered, his voice tight. Hey, man. I couldn't hear Jake's side, but Ethan's face darkened as he listened. Yeah, I'm at your place, he said. No, it's complicated. A pause. Then, I'll tell you when you're back. Just, don't worry. Okay. He hung up, his shoulders slumping. Jake's coming home tomorrow, he said. He knows something's up. You gonna tell him? I asked, my stomach twisting at the thought. Jake was my brother, but Ethan was his best friend. I didn't know how he'd react to Ethan's truth or to mine. If it came to that. I have to, Ethan said. He deserves to know. I nodded, but the thought of Jake knowing, of everything coming to light, made my chest tight. Whatever happens, I said, I've got your back. He looked at me, his eyes soft and fierce all at once. I know, he said. And I need you to know something else. But he didn't finish, because the kitchen light flicked on, and my mom stood there, blinking at us. Everything okay, boys? She asked, her voice sleepy but kind. Yeah, Mom, I said quickly, just grabbing a snack. She nodded, giving us a look that said she knew more than she was letting on, and shuffled back to bed. Ethan and I stood there, the moment broken but not gone, the weight of his unspoken words lingering. The next day, Jake came home, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his grin as easy as ever. But when he saw Ethan, his smile faltered. What's going on, man? He asked, glancing between us. You look like hell. Ethan took a deep breath, and I felt the air shift, like the world was holding its breath. We need to talk, he said, and my heart sank, knowing nothing would be the same after this. We sat in the living room, the three of us, and Ethan told Jake everything his dad. The letter, the fight. Jake listened, his face unreadable, and when Ethan finished, the silence was suffocating. You're still my best friend, Jake said finally, his voice steady. Doesn't change a thing. Ethan's relief was palpable, but Jake's eyes flicked to me, and I saw the question there. He knew me too well, knew there was more to this than I was saying. But he didn't push, just clapped Ethan on the shoulder and said, You're staying here as long as you need. That night, after Jake went to bed, Ethan found me on the porch, the summer air warm and thick. I didn't finish earlier, he said, sitting beside me. What I needed to tell you. My heart was in my throat, but I nodded. I'm listening. He looked at me, his eyes steady, and said, That letter my dad found. It was to you. The world stopped. Ethan's words hit me like a freight train, and I stared at him, my mind scrambling to catch up. The letter, the one that had torn his life apart, was to me. What? I managed, my voice barely a whisper. Ethan looked away, his hands gripping the porch railing. I wrote it a year ago, after you left for college. I didn't know how to tell you, so I wrote it down. Everything I felt, everything I've been hiding. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break. Why didn't you send it? He laughed, a bitter sound. Because I was scared. Scared of what it'd mean. Scared of losing you and Jake. Scared of everything. I reached for him, my hand brushing his arm, and he didn't pull away. You wouldn't have lost me, I said, my voice shaking. Ethan, I I felt the same way. For years. His eyes snapped to mine, wide with disbelief. You're serious? I nodded, the truth spilling out now. Unstoppable. I came out to Jake last year. I didn't tell you because I thought you'd never feel the same. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the weight of years of silence breaking between us. Then Ethan moved, closing the distance, his lips finding mine in a kiss that was desperate and soft all at once. It was like coming home, like every moment of longing had led to this. His hands cupped my face, and I felt the world fall away, leaving just us. Just this. When we pulled back, breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, he whispered. I'm sorry I didn't either, I said, smiling through the ache in my chest. But we're here now. We sat there, wrapped in each other, the night stretching out like a promise. But the real world was waiting, and we both knew it. Ethan's dad, the town, the life we'd both been running from, it wasn't gone. But for the first time, it felt like we could face it. Together. The next morning, we made a plan. Ethan would stay with us until he could afford a place of his own. I'd help him find a new job, maybe at the garage in the next town over, where no one knew his dad. And when my semester started, we'd figure out the rest together. Jake caught us holding hands in the kitchen, and for a second, I thought he'd lose it. But he just raised an eyebrow and said, "Took you idiots long enough." We laughed, the tension breaking, and I realized how lucky we were to have him. Weeks turned into months, and Ethan started to rebuild. He got a job, saved up, and found a small apartment near my college. I visited when I could, and every time I saw him, he was a little brighter, a little more himself. The town still whispered, and his dad never came around. But Ethan was done hiding. So was I. One night, we sat in my car again, parked by Miller's Pond, the place where it all began. The stars were out, and Ethan's hand was warm in mine. You know, he said, that night you picked me up. I thought I was running away, but I was running to you. I kissed him, slow and sure, and knew he was right. That night, he'd needed a ride home, but he'd never gotten out of my car, and I hoped he never would. We drove back to his apartment, the road stretching ahead, no longer dark but full of possibility. The journey wasn't over, but we were on it together, and that was enough.